Okay, everyone, so where we last left off, we had just added a link to our web page, which is great. That's good functionality. But now we want to actually add this image that we talked about. So an image tag is a little bit different from the other tags that we've seen because most of the tags that we'll deal with, most tags in HTML are symmetrical. Which means that there's an opening tag that has the name of, there's a first tag that has the name of the tag, and then we see this sort of / before the name, and that's the so-called closing tag, right? An image tag is not symmetrical. It just starts with img. And then in it, its attribute, okay, is actually the location of the image, is the image itself. So, normally what we would do is we would actually upload images to a server. In this case, we can point to the image. We can also grab the location of an image that's stored on someone else's server. So in this case, if I right click on this image, I can say copy image address, okay, and that's the URL of that image. And I can test that out by actually just pasting it in here, and you'll see that on the end is PNG, and this is going to show me just that image, right? So if I put this in the if I put this in the source attribute, so SRC is short for source, then it's going to let me load this image directly on my web page. Now, again, an image tag is not symmetrical. It doesn't close twice in a way. It doesn't have sort of a partner tag. This one, I just do a / before the end of the tag, and that's how it works. And again, we can test this by just coming back here and reloading our page. And we see that we've now loaded that. Now, a caveat to this is that when I load this page, right, when I reload my own individual page, what this means is that actually one of the things that the browser is doing is it's actually connecting to this website and loading a copy of the image. What that means is that while we can connect to other people's resources very often, we can connect to their images, sometimes to their videos, things like that, it is not free to do that. It's one of the reasons why big content sharing sites like YouTube and Vimeo and SoundCloud, all of these things provide such a service because it costs money to have content made available, it costs money to rent the servers, basically, that allow that content to be on the web. It costs money every time somebody downloads something, right? Or even loads it in their browser. So you don't actually have to be saving something into your computer for it to incur a cost for the person who put it on the internet. So it's okay, I'm not worried about it in a context like this. It's a very small image. I'm not going to be loading it that many times, but it is to say that in general, when we're using resources, we want to make sure that we bring them onto our own server. We'll upload them through the SFTP the way we did in class, just the way we'll upload this web page eventually. We will upload them to our own server so that those costs are being, we're the ones who are sort of paying those costs, right? And we get free hosting up to a certain amount of space at Columbia, which is a nice resource that they offer. So anyhow, so now I have my image, which is great. But this isn't like the best looking web page in the world, is it? First of all, I do kind of want a title on here, so I'm actually going to bring back my H1 here, my H1 tag here, and I'm going to say recent UG stories with visuals. Okay. And again, I can just hit the reload button and here we go. But, this isn't organized in a really great way. I'd like this title to look different. I'd like it to be larger for one thing. The scale of this image is a little bit off. I'd kind of like to have them aligned, maybe have this indented so they line up a little better. So the thing is that HTML doesn't do that for us. In order to do that, we have to apply styles. Styles are what change the font size and the image size and all of these other things. And there's the most direct way to handle this, right, is actually to apply them directly to the element, right? So I can come here to my div and I can just say, I'm going to add a style attribute, Okay, so again, you see that even though the specific values are different, you notice there's a slightly different color red that my Aptana is using here. It's a brighter red, and this is sort of more of a brick red. So it's using brick red for HTML element names or tags, so a tag and an element, those are used interchangeably. For attributes, they're using this kind of bright red. And you may be wondering, well, how do we learn what attributes are, what tags are? The answer is you kind of look it up. There aren't that many. There are not that many that you're going to use frequently. So 90% of the tags that we create are going to be div tags. And for the most part, although we haven't gotten there yet, we're going to be using one of probably 4 or 5 attribute tags for most of our divs. And we'll sort of, in the process of these videos, I'll sort of explain why that is. So I can use a style tag, and I can say something like font size. Let's make this 24 pixels, okay? So again, if you notice, I've got this sort of brick color. So font size, where did I get that? Again, this is something that I know. Fortunately, you can see that Aptana provides some assistance here. So it's showing, when it says CSS core, you can think of that as the dictionary, right? So the dictionary of cascading style sheets has all of these different things. One of them is font size. So if I select it and hit return, it actually does this form, it does the additional formatting for me. So it's always going to be within that. It's going to be the name of the style attribute, a colon, right? And then the value, I'm going to choose 24 pixels, and then a semicolon, right? And I could actually add to this. So I can do this. I'm just going to see that this worked, right? So there we can see, got bigger. That's a good thing. I can add to this, right? So I can actually put as many in on one line as I want. So I'm also going to say color, which actually happens to influence the text color. I'm going to say, let's see, this uses hexadecimal. So any hexadecimal colors, any value repeated for all six possible digits, hex 6, digits or characters, I should say, will be some grayscale. White is all Fs, black is all zeros. We can talk about the details of why that is. Now, this is an interesting thing. So I tried to apply a color to this, but it didn't really work. And if you think about it, you can probably guess why. And that's because this is a link. So one thing about basic HTML tags is that browsers, just like with this H1, browsers have built into them ways of styling, right, of presenting visually some of the most basic HTML tags. So again, this goes back to, when computers were really slow and didn't have a lot of power or a lot of options, you wanted to not have to add a lot of additional information to the page in order for it to make sense. So many browsers will, they have a default way that they show links, for example. Now, as the designer of a page, I can override this, but in order to override it, what I'm doing right now is I'm applying styles to the div. The problem is that the browser has a way of handling this anchor tag, right? Where it says it's going to be this color and it's going to be underlined, and after you visit it, it's going to be this other color. And if I wanted to change that, I would have to apply it directly to this anchor tag. So I can actually add a style tag, pardon me, to this anchor tag. And I could say something like text decoration. And I can say none. Now, again, these are things that I know because I've been doing this for a long time. You'll develop a sense of which are the most common ones. And I believe, yep, so there goes my underline, right? But what's useful to know about this is that styles are applied at the sort of from the ground up, right? So anything that is applied directly to this anchor tag is going to override anything that is any style that's applied to this div tag. The closer you get to the element, the more power it has, right? So you can think of it almost like a magnetic force, right? The closer you are, the stronger it is. And so for example, I could override the font size here. If I have two competing styles and I say, no, I've decided that my anchor tag is going to be 18 pixels. Well, there it goes, right? So I can double up, and the answer is the question of which one is going to show up is always going to be which one is closer to sort of the material itself, right? So the one that's directly on the anchor tag is always going to override. So I'm going to get rid of these styles because, I want my audience to know, I want my audience to know that, that this is a link, so I'm going to leave the default styles, right? Convention is useful for us in design. But I do want to change the size of this image. So again, I'm going to go back over here and on my, so here I'm going to apply it to, on this div, I can say things like width, and I can say I want the width to be 400 pixels. Okay, so let's see what this does. Well, that didn't really do much, did it? So here's the reason why. Because the default size of an image can often overrun the div that it's in. So you would expect that a div would be a certain size box. A div is just a box on the page. You would expect that it could override that. You would expect that that would contain my image. It doesn't. Images are allowed to sort of overrun their edges unless we are pretty emphatic about keeping them confined. So the way that I can handle this, there are a few different ways to handle this. So one is that there happens to be a width attribute that is applicable to an image. And if I apply this, you'll see it does successfully change the width of the image, okay? You'll notice also that I only specified the width. The default behavior for scaling an image is that if you only specify one parameter, it will scale it proportionally. I could cause it to be distorted by specifying a weird width and height, right? So I could say, but I want the height to be 200 pixels, and I believe, oops. Oh, yeah, sorry, I did this inside here. So again, why do I have width and height on image? Those are specific attributes that work on images. In other cases, anytime we're dealing with a div, we're always going to do it inside a style tag. So let's see what happens there. So now it's distorted my image. So if I want to maintain the aspect ratio, then the easiest thing to do is just only apply one, whichever one I sort of care about most. Now, in order to kind of demonstrate so you can see what's happening with this div, I'm going to add a border style. And again, this is a shorthand. I'll make it black. So this is a shorthand because normally when we specify a border, there are three properties that a border can have. It has a line style, it has a width, and then it has a color. Now I can specify all of these separately. I could say border style, border width, border color, but because we typically want to specify all three, there's a shorthand for describing border styles that we're using here. And so this is what I want to demonstrate, right? So we see this. Now if I were to remove, so you see how it's done a border, so this is the size of my div. Now if I were to come back here and remove this width parameter, what we can see is that image is actually overrunning the border, overriding the border of my div. I can explain a little bit why that happens, but the short version is basically that we'll generally apply styles directly to, we'll want to specify image sizes sort of directly for the time being. We will correct that later. Anyhow, so hopefully this gives you a sense of what some of the possibilities are. There's one other thing that I want to point out here. So I'm going to remove my div size here just to show you that the default pattern is that it spreads out to the width of the screen, right? What we see here is why we love HTML for modern web development, which is it naturally adapts to screen size. This is something that previous technologies didn't do, but it means that you don't have to kind of redesign your web page 80 different times for different screen sizes. So when we come back, we're going to look at factoring these out and making a longer list.